Serious parents who have adopted an older child, 5 and up, how has it gone for you? Do you regret it or would you recommend other parents considering adoption look into an older child? Attention. Serious tag notice jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with the child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an ARMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. Adopted a child who was 11 when I was 21. He was my wife's younger cousin and his household was marred with substance abuse, filth, instability, and mental health issues. Knew it was bad but didn't know how bad. Took him, 11, and his brother, 14, for a summer once, just to give them a break from what we thought was a dirty house with an overwhelmed parent until I took them back the week before school started and saw the filth firsthand, the smell and the random people coming in, out, the wreckage we were about to have to leave them in, the fact that in this time his Xbox and games I had hand-me-downed him has been sold along with the TV. The two had one mattress on a floor and the younger one said, "I can't wait for school to start back," and when I asked why, he said, "Because then I get to eat every day, like when I'm at your house." I told him to just get back in the car. His mother never even called to ask why he or his brother didn't come home until tax season, to make sure we didn't claim him on our taxes, etc. Never wished him a happy birthday, Christmas, nothing. My wife and I grew up very quickly. We worked hard and got full custody about a year later when he was 12. He grew up healthy and happy, successful with great grades and a good head on his shoulders. His brother who was 14 lived with us for the first year, then would go back and forth trying to help his mom get her life together before returning again, but for the most part during those years, the younger child we had full custody of and the older child came, went as he needed. It wasn't until years later when the younger of the two moved out with his friends, instead of taking our offer to go to college right after school, and began having substance abuse issues of his own, that we learned the extent of the abuse he had endured at home for nearly his entire childhood and kept inside, sexual and physical, for years, starting when he was about 5, from his mother's friends and boyfriends and even a family member due to their terrible situation. It was heartbreaking. He ended up going through a pretty severe addiction period in his early to mid-20s, and regardless what we've tried and how many small successes we've worked with him to reach, he always ends up in a severe depression and turning back to drugs again. The last time I talked to him, about a week ago, I told him I loved him and would help him get into a very nice rehab community when he's ready and help him get a good job and place for himself, but only when he's ready to be clean, and until then, we simply can't do anything for him. And it was hard to do. I am in the second half of my 30s now, have 3 children in grade school who need me like he did then, who also love him. Our oldest looks at him like a big brother, but unfortunately we have to keep our distance a bit so they don't have to see close up the ugly side of addiction in someone they love. Now that he's an adult in his mid-20s himself making these choices, we can't have any real relationship other than the occasional call or letter until he's done. He loves them too, but he's got some demons that we cannot possibly understand, and until he's ready to get help for them or help for his addiction, we don't have much of a relationship. His brother worked hard and straightened their mother out over the years into a functioning adult, and mother got her life together, a job, a place, everything, and as adults, never left her. In fact, due to him, his brother spent the last year of his teens sharing our household and hers back forth, which wouldn't have been possible without him. The older brother and her are roommates now, and we are very proud of him for the man he's become, what he's persevered, and the incredible progress he's made with their mother, and how he's stuck by her side now, providing as equals. I never realized it, but he and I really grew up together, only being 5 to 6 years apart in age, and were best friends for years as young adults, even after his younger brother moved out. One of my biggest regrets is somehow letting those days end. He loves his brother too, but his and his mother's relationship with his brother is the same as ours, the delicate balance between helpful love versus enabling, due to understanding the pain he's probably trying to understand, repress, until he's able to beat this. And he will. Nothing is perfect, just what you make of it, I suppose, but it has highlighted to us how important the early years of a child's development are, and how damaging all forms of abuse can be, regardless how much effort you put into trying to change things afterward. And also how important it is for a child to have an adult who genuinely cares about them, since sadly many don't. Would I recommend it? Yes. But be honest with yourself why you're doing it and know what you're getting into. You're not getting a good, bad kid, you're getting an opportunity to be a good, bad parent. Children this age need you as much as a baby does. They bring happiness the same as a baby does and also present their own unique challenges the same as parents do, which is what they're signing up for too without knowing, and most importantly the reason you should be adopting is for them. You get to give your love, time, affection and a portion of your life and heart too. Would I do it again? Every single time. I feel I got lucky. He was 9 when we adopted him, but he was just grateful to have a home and people who loved him. My wife and I love him dearly as he does us. Asterisk thank you for the silver. This is my first time getting one. You, Christian Hughes 649 asterisk 2 silvers. Thank you, you, exactly accurate Joe asterisk 3 thanks to, you, high or not high enough. Thank you for this comment. I posted this below, but I want to thank you specifically. It seems like you have a great view of being an adoptive parent. A lot of people in this thread are using hero, savior language, and it really mischaracterizes the parent-child relationship. For anyone wondering why that can be troublesome, here's a blog and quote that explain it way better than I could. Conversation suggesting I am a hero for being my son's mom suggests he is more difficult to love or parent than my biological son. It suggests it takes heroic effort to choose to love someone who doesn't share your blood or DNA. We are no saviors. We are parents. Telling an adoptee they're lucky, their parents are heroes, implies they should be thankful they were adopted. But what if part of their heart grieves this aspect of their identity? My pre-adoptive son just moved in 6 weeks ago. He's almost 10. Him getting here has been a bit of a long and wild story, but he's been in care since he was 6. It hasn't been easy, but there's so many older kids who need families. My biggest thing is just to make damn sure you're committed. Know your limits. Be honest with yourself and your adoption coordinator. And demand honesty from the social worker as well. Ask for psych evals and treatment histories. Because if you convince yourself, oh I can handle this, and you change your mind, you are re-traumatizing that child. My son has complex trauma from years of abuse, but the thing he talks about most after his meltdowns. Having to leave his first pre-adoptive home because he kept losing his temper and throwing things. He's been in 4 to 5 placements and a PRTF since then. I work with girls involved in juvenile justice, so I felt uniquely prepared for this situation, and even for me, it's been physically and emotionally exhausting. I'm a single parent and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so I'm sure that's a factor. But if you choose to adopt, there shouldn't be any changing your mind or this just isn't working out. That kiddo is part of your family. My son and I have a little mantra, together forever. Even when things get hard, even when things get sad. That's a beautiful mantra. I bet it's a comfort for you both. Thanks for sharing your story. Right? It's not an experiment. My wife and I adopted an older girl from our state's foster system. The girl was 13 when we adopted her, and we were told she had a rough childhood full of abuse and she had been diagnosed with general mood disorder. Little did we know that the psychological assessment was done by an unqualified state doctor, and this little girl had severe issues that required more care than my wife and I were prepared for. We spent 5 years dealing with fighting, arguing, runaway attempts, drug use, alcohol abuse, constant emotional manipulation, constant lying, stealing, etc. She was also in constant contact with her schizophrenic birth mother behind our backs. The woman kept feeding our daughter conspiracy theories and lies and constantly making the situation worse for all of us. We tried the best we could for 5 whole years, trying various different therapists, trying different parenting methods, seeing different doctors, all to no avail. It wasn't until about 5 months before her 18th birthday that we had to have her committed, and we finally got a proper diagnosis. She was diagnosed with bipolar and BPD, and we finally had an answer to the years of hell we all had to go through. We did our research and learned the proper way to parent a child with these conditions, and things began to improve over the last few months she was with us, but on her 18th birthday she bailed and we haven't seen her since. That was 5 years ago. I'm so sorry. You guys really did try, and that matters a lot more than you think. I took guardianship of my son's half-sister when she was 14. Their father, who is not and will never be a part of my son's life, was abusive and tried to molest her once when he was drunk. As a result, she was hypersexual and acted out. Her mother was a pushover who didn't know how to handle her, so she was put into the system. I knew she wasn't a bad kid, so I stepped in and said I'd take her. It was rough that first year. She tested the boundaries a lot until she realized that I wasn't going to give up on her. I think it also helped that her baby brother adored her and my parents welcomed her with open arms. We found her a good therapist that she clicked with, and that really helped her work through her issues. She finished school with good grades, met her boyfriend who is wonderful with her. She has kids of her own now and is a fantastic mother. Best decision I ever made was taking her in. Thank you for sharing and thank you for being you. I'm glad she's doing so well. It's often hard to understand for foster parents, but if they start acting out it means they are feeling more and more at home. They need to know you will hold on to them unconditionally, and when there's a breakthrough it often goes a lot better. Removed. We adopted our eldest daughter at 10. We actually adopted her baby half-sister first. After the mom met us, since we were doing this via foster care, she asked if we'd adopt her other daughter too. She had been in and out of foster care most of her life, and her bio mom selflessly made the decision to let her go for stability and safety. We definitely weren't planning to adopt an older child. We already had a 6-year-old biological child, but after meeting the 10-year-old, we knew we'd want her to be a part of our family. It's been 16 years and it definitely hasn't always been easy, but we have no regrets. We love our daughter like our own. She was challenging to raise the first few years, definitely had some trust issues with us and some deep-seated abandonment issues. Family therapy helped. Every once in a while, like once every few years or so, these issues resurface. She still struggles with depression and anxiety. It'd be lying if I said this doesn't worry me, it does, but she seems to have a handle on it. She's always been incredibly smart and talented. She just finished her master's degree, has had a successful career thus far, and she's engaged to a wonderful man. They were supposed to get married this summer, now we aren't sure. Thanks COVID. It's almost odd that she has really excelled in everything she's ever tried. She thinks it's mostly due to good luck. We call her, half-jokingly, our achiever. Some of her success was due to our parenting I'm sure, but most of it is just her and how she's wired. I'm proud to be her mom. That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear everything went well. How's your biological child doing? I've heard that the attention that an adopted child requires can cause a biological child to feel left out. Removed. We adopted a 15-year-old girl, after raising 3 bio kids to adulthood. It has been good but quite different from what we expected. 15-year-olds are not fully formed, but almost. She is a nice smart kid. But also got pregnant, hid it for 4 months. Had a beautiful baby. We expected to finish high school and hold down a part-time job, save some money which she would need to become independent after graduation. Her goal, she moved 1,000 miles away. Took up with kind of a rough crowd. Was immersed in a druggy thiefy homeless group that made her fear that her son would end up removed and back in the foster care system. For now the baby is with us. Almost 2 babies are a lot of work but also a lot of joy and laughter. We are about 60. Occasionally I think, this is not what we signed up for, but in reality it is exactly what we signed up for. Most folks when they have a kid or multiple kids have a bunch of expectations. Part of what makes it interesting is that the kids come with their own personalities, software, journeys, whatever you want to call it. Can make for a wild, interesting 20 years. My parents adopted 3 older children over the years, a 6-year-old girl, then a 13-year-old boy and 16-year-old girl. They had a very similar outcome with my oldest sister. It just took longer to happen. My parents had recently become empty nesters after having 3 adopted and 1 biological child, and were looking forward to it. None of the adoptions were a positive experience for anyone. Despite my parents doing everything in their power to help their kids, they were relieved to move forward. They found out she was pregnant a year after she had run away and moved to another city. She was 20 and wanted to be a mom, so they supported her in every way imaginable, paid for an apartment, all of the baby stuff, eventually let her move back in when she was struggling being on her own. A few weeks after having the baby she took off again, told my parents she didn't want to be a mom right now and have them guardianship. They didn't want another kid, but there wasn't much of a choice. They weren't going to let him go into the system. We didn't see her or hear from her for over a year. At that point she contacted them and said she wanted to have them officially adopt him. He's 8 now and they love him dearly, but I would be lying if I said I didn't wish things had gone differently. I hope that things work out for you guys. That baby is lucky to have you and Lieutenant 3. Glad you still have a positive outlook on the situation. I would never pay for Reddit coins, but I wish you the best. Long story inbound, I'm going to cut it down as much as I can. My wife and I are a little older, so when we decided to adopt we opted for an older child for a host of reasons, one being it made more sense for us financially. Healthy infant adoptions are crazy expensive for average people like us, plus the long waits, etc., and also because our hearts went out for older children whom society generally wants to look over and forget. These kids need a home too. We chose to adopt from the foster care system. This meant taking the same set of classes as standard aspiring foster parents, so even though we had no intention of becoming actual foster parents, we learned what they learn and became legitimate foster parents. We took in a troubled 13-year-old girl. I won't tell her personal story of how she got into the system, except to say it was not as one might expect. We stuck through it with her. There were lots of twists and turns in her story, and we found out the hard way that she was not, in fact, clear for adoption months into the process, so we became what we wanted to avoid, foster parents instead of adoptive parents. I'll never forget during one of the regularly scheduled court appearances we were obligated to go to, of having the court workers review her story to the court and later having random people sob in the back from listening to it, and tell us, "We will pray for you." She was angry at the world for her situation. Angry at her bio mom for abandoning her. Angry at the system for forgetting her for so many years. She lashed out at us many times as well, thinking we would just give up on her. I'll never forget her slamming the door to her room and screaming at my wife, "I hate you," over and over, and my wife barely holding it together and saying, "I love you anyway," each time. My wife and I had moments of despair. When one of us would grow weak and say we couldn't do this anymore and maybe we should consider giving up, the other would remind us, well, what would we do in this situation if she were our child? And we would nod, and press on. One day, about a year and a half in, this child turned to me while I was driving her somewhere and said, "I don't want to go back to my bio mom. I want you. I want you to be my dad," and I, a grown-ass man, broke down and wept. The adoption went final when she was 15. Yes, it was that long of a process, but the actual adoption took all of 5 minutes in a judge's chamber, for which this girl quipped, "That's it. Just the stroke of a pen. Hell, I'd have lent you a pen years ago." People who didn't know us back then honestly are surprised to learn she was adopted. She's an honor graduate from high school now, and is planning to attend college in the fall for nursing. We couldn't be more proud of this child, our daughter. Edit. It seems I made a lot of people cry. I still get a lump in my throat and moist-eyed every time I talk about the day she asked me to be her father, even now, 5 years on. I share this story every chance I get because it is my sincerest hope that maybe it'll move even one person or couple to consider adopting an older child, or maybe at least help in other ways such as donating clothes, toys, etc. These kids move from home to home so much that in many cases all they have is the clothes on their back and maybe a knick-knack or two. Our child had a single suitcase's worth of loose ill-fitting clothes, some books, and a single photograph of herself as a baby that she kept in her sock everywhere she went in case she had to leave without her suitcase. I'll never forget her slamming the door to her room and screaming at my wife, "I hate you," over and over, and my wife barely holding it together and saying, "I love you anyway," each time. This is making me weep a bunch. I'm really glad you and your wife were there for her. And each other. Thanks for doing what you do. I think you're amazing, and I'm sat here crying because this thread, in all of its dark moments, shows there are really wonderful selfless parents out here putting their own mental and physical health in jeopardy just so these kids can know there are people who love them.